What's up everybody? Welcome back to my channel. I have something different for you guys today. I'm going to be doing my very first film review on this channel. It is a long time coming, but it's something I've wanted to start doing for a long time alongside the rest of my content, because us spooky girls, we don't just love Halloween, we do love us some spooky movies, okay? You guys. So I saw MaXXXine on opening day. It was one of the most anticipated horror films for me of the year, and man, X and Pearl were so extremely good. Pearl was my favorite by far, but X was campy, 70s, very grainy, grindhouse, Texas Chainsaw Massacre, Friday the 13th kind of vibes. It nailed that great element of suspense and horror and creepiness. They actually did a good job of character development in the few scenes that everybody had, that you cared when they were offed. I always appreciate that about a horror film. I also really appreciated about X that Pearl as a character was so interesting. This older woman, she's a killer, like what's her story? What made me so excited that Pearl was gonna have a backstory. And Pearl is an absolute masterpiece from top to bottom. Great storytelling, great character study. Mia Goth, her performance was absolutely stellar. I hold that in such high regard. It's right up there with Toni Collette in Hereditary. Dare I say even Shelley Duvall in The Shining. Mia Goth has the acting chops, okay? So I was so excited for MaXXXine, and for me it just did not deliver. It did not pack the same punch that X and Pearl did, albeit that X and Pearl were two very different films stylistically, but they meshed well. It was in the same setting, it was giving you just a great backstory for why Pearl ended up being the way that she was, and I felt that they went really well together. We have established the very 70s vibe of X, the very Technicolor Wizard of Oz 1930s vibe of Pearl, and then we have the beautifully gorgeous 80s neon tech noir vibe of MaXXXine. I will give credit where credit is due for the incredible representation of the 80s. They did a phenomenal job there setting the tone for everything. I'm a sucker for that era just like everyone else is, very nostalgic for it, even though it was a time that I didn't really get to grow up in, but I just love it so much. I did not expect the genre to change. MaXXXine I would not classify as a horror film. I am desensitized. I mean, if you've seen the Terrifier films, you're definitely desensitized. X was very much a horror film. Pearl, very much a drama horror. Now MaXXXine, I would say it's trying to be an 80s mystery thriller, but I don't even think it hits those marks, because there's no mystery for me because it was very predictable. There was no thrill because there was no suspense, and just because there happened to be a couple of kills on screen or a couple of moments, it's still not horror. I wasn't in suspense at any time in this film. The only thing it was beautiful to look at, and that was just for a while until the novelty wore off. Yeah, the 80s vibe was done well, although it was trying to be something completely different than what I expected. It was not horror, it was more like 80s mystery thriller noir vibes. Cop drama. Chinatown. I don't know. I'm really not sure what they were truly trying to accomplish with this, but they did not accomplish a horror film, and that's actually not even my gripe. My gripe is the meat of the story. I do want to warn you guys that there are going to be spoilers in this review, so if you haven't seen the film yet, you don't want anything spoiled, cut this video off right now and come back at a later time after you've seen it. So what I will say is the opening scene was absolutely incredible. I was glued from the moment it began to MaXXXine's entire audition scene. It was filmed beautifully. Mia Goth's performance was excellent. The audition mirrored and was very reminiscent of Pearl's audition. So it was nice to see that juxtaposition. The way she walks out like a badass after having nailed that, gets in the car, drives away. Dude, the scene that lingers on the license plate where the car drives away, absolute chef's kiss. The way MaXXXine was filmed and edited was gorgeously spot on. Great stylistic choices. The score and the soundtrack were fantastic. Tyler Bates always does a great job. But other than the sets, the cinematography, the soundtrack, there was nothing else there. There is a quote in the opening of the film from Bette Davis that states, "In this business, until you're known as a monster, you're not a star." Which from the very beginning, I appreciated the use of the Bette Davis quote, because in Pearl, the character gave me a very Whatever Happened to Baby Jane vibe. She very much had that delusional Baby Jane syndrome, really wasn't very talented, and she just was always very quite delusional about her abilities. Having said that, I don't believe that even through everything that MaXXXine became enough of a monster to drive that theme home. So as far as MaXXXine as a character, I actually don't feel that we got enough time with her or enough dialogue from her in the film to even create much of a connection. We know her story and her history with the events of X, but beyond that, they don't focus too much on developing her character beyond she has a couple of seemingly badass moments. a couple. MaXXXine had very little dialogue. She's such a star, but yet you never see her do much beyond the initial audition in the beginning of the film. It would have been really interesting to see her more involved in filming The Puritan 2, to see her maybe go through some type of experience during filming the movie. I liked the moments where she would have flashbacks of seeing Pearl. I felt that the scene with MaXXXine getting the cast of her head done for The Puritan 2, I felt that that was the best scene in the movie, and that's when I thought it was really gonna go somewhere. Like, I was very happy with the very first third/half of the film. I thought it was going somewhere, and that was a very pinnacle scene, a turning point, when she was having the head cast done and she's having like this PTSD moment, this panic attack when Pearl is like creeping up behind her. That's where the film should have taken a turn and kind of gone more in that direction. What was the point in having her have PTSD and these visions, seeing Pearl in the window of the psycho house? I want to know what all of that was for, just for that idea to be thrown out the window and everything just then becomes focused on these weird FBI agents that are completely unrealistic, and the rest is just all these other characters. I think the film got too distracted with too many different characters, too many actors that they got involved in the project, which they were all great actors. I appreciated their performances, but I feel like having so many people involved in the project and trying to fit in all these puzzle pieces of characters, basically half of them are cameos, they're trying to fit them all in, and that's distracting from the most important part of the story, which is MaXXXine and how she's dealing with the aftermath of X and how she's still trying to seek and accomplish her path to fame through this post-traumatic stress that she's having. Not enough focus on that. Although it was exceptionally well done, I think it focused too much on setting the scene for the 80s and not enough on creating a gripping story. Focused too much on the theme and too much on the time period, and I don't think it was really clever enough compared to the first two films. There were a lot of cliche lines and dialogue. She didn't have enough gripping moments to truly create a really strong heroine character, or to even become that monster in the end that they claim that she's going to be to gain this fame. They mixed in the Night Stalker, which I don't feel is quite appropriate. I don't think you should be mixing a real life serial killer in with a fictional one. I just find that odd, and I don't think the mix-up copycat killer vibe was totally necessary. I actually think it held back the potential of the film to be even better. And what really didn't make sense to me is that their kills happen off screen. A lot of the kills happen off screen, which made this less of a horror film and made you care about the characters less. Now, if we would have followed these girls into their deaths, if we would have seen more of them on their own very shortly leading up to them being killed, we might have cared a little more about it. Who cares that these killings are happening? You have no connection to these people or what happened to them. You don't get to see anything. You're seeing everything from MaXXXine's perspective. I get it, but MaXXXine's not having much of a reaction to it. You'd think if she has PTSD and these killings of people around her are happening, she'd be a little bit more freaked out. I don't care how much of a badass they try to portray her as. I mean, she's a human being, and it would have been nice to see a more human side of her before becoming this fame monster. If you're gonna do an homage to like cop dramas of the 80s, I mean, was this time and place really? And if it was the time and place, I don't feel like it was well executed. MaXXXine just throws the first two films completely out the window. It's a hodgepodge of an homage with no real storyline. It's all over the place. It's a mess. The use of the universal backlot was so awesome, but they wasted so much time on having Kevin Bacon as this detective, Chinatown clone, chasing her through this universal backlot, but I believe he's chasing her into the psycho house, and it should have gone from there. Like, he chases her and then he gets taken away, and then that chase kind of ends, and it kind of made it for nothing because nothing came of it. What would have been cool is if he did chase her, trying to get out of the psycho house, and maybe encounters a spirit of, or a vision of, or a panic attack related to Pearl in this house as she's having flashbacks. Something interesting could have happened there. What an amazing thing to have in the film, and yet I don't think it was utilized to its full potential. I don't know, I just feel like that was a waste. I don't see the point in that detective chasing her around for no good reason. After the scene where she gets the head cast done, I do feel that the film really fell off for me. It just really took a turn, and it just didn't live up to its full potential after that. It could have gone in so many different directions, which I'll get into in a minute. I have some theories of ways it could have gone, which would have been a little bit more satisfying than how it ended. I believe that the detective character overstayed his welcome in the film. Yes, Kevin Bacon was amazing in that role, but I don't think it needed to go on as long as it did. His kill was interesting, but I just find that her agent helping her kill Kevin Bacon was just very unrealistic. Where X and Pearl, they kept a sense of realism in the films where like maybe this could actually happen. I didn't get that with MaXXXine. MaXXXine felt like a fever dream. No one was behaving properly. Everyone behaved very odd. The FBI agents were odd. Kevin Bacon was odd. Her father was odd. MaXXXine was odd. Lily Collins and Halsey's characters were also, their behavior was a little out there, and maybe that was all because there's something that Ti West was trying to emulate from the 80s, which, man, I appreciate that, but I don't know if this was the time and place, man. Make a different film. It didn't need to happen with MaXXXine. It just really didn't, and I felt that it really ruined the potential that the storyline had to be an epic conclusion to this trilogy. The last act of the film was so all over the place. It felt as if they didn't know how to end the film. They chose a very predictable route with her father, and they gave MaXXXine a seemingly happy ending, which I don't know how I feel about that. I always like to see a heroine survive, but I don't think her having a happy ending by gaining this fame she feels she wanted, I don't think that was the ending we needed. Although MaXXXine's father was shown at the end of X, I think he should have been woven into the story, and that part of the storyline should have had its own resolution to it, but I don't think that should have been the primary premise of the film. I think that killed it for me. So here's what I feel could have been done to make it more interesting and to give an epic conclusion to this amazing trilogy. I think the idea of her having post-traumatic stress could have been a very big driving force of the film. I really liked the friend that she had that worked at the video store, and I wish that they would have developed their relationship just a little bit more. He was a character that I liked the idea of, but I don't feel that he had enough screen time. I like that she seemingly kept him around because maybe she just didn't feel safe anymore, and I think that that should have been touched on more. She needed someone to be there for her without her wanting to admit it, because she does have this badass energy. I can take care of myself, I don't need anybody, but she actually did. She needed a friend, she needed someone to be there for her to make her feel safe, and I feel like that would have been something to focus on more. We needed more MaXXXine in MaXXXine. I didn't feel like I got enough of her to feel satisfied with the ending of the story. I think it would be interesting if MaXXXine would have herself been the killer. I mean, that would have actually made the opening quote make sense. Would have been really cool if she would have ended up just being a serial killer and going to prison at the end, and that's how she becomes famous or infamous in a way that she did not expect. Is it a happy ending? Absolutely not, but it would have been interesting to see. She could have been a copycat killer and then maybe got away with it, kind of like Secret Window with Johnny Depp. I know that that theme has been used before as well, but I think that if they would have went with it, they could have done an even better job at it. It would at least been more interesting than a religious cult and her father in some weird stage makeup filming some kind of religious snuff film, and that's the ending. That's the ending. I just feel like her having the PTSD and maybe being a copycat killer herself, maybe she doesn't even know it. Maybe she's disconnected and there's part of her that is the real MaXXXine in her own timeline, and then maybe she has like a split personality issue going on. She's kind of lost her sanity a little bit after the events of X. There is another alternative ending that I prefer, and it could be woven in with the PTSD theory. Maybe MaXXXine becomes haunted and or possessed by Pearl for real. I know that that then makes the series supernatural, but who cares? Who cares? As long as it made for a really cool ending, man. It would have been awesome to see Mia Goth reprise her role as Old Pearl, to haunt her more, and to maybe while MaXXXine is filming a scene in the Puritan too, she has some kind of episode where to everyone else it looks like a panic attack, but really she's just being actively possessed by Pearl. Or this possession could have happened in the Psycho House, which would have been a really cool use of that set. And I feel like if she could have been possessed by Pearl, it would make everything make sense, because Pearl wanted this level of fame that MaXXXine is getting so badly. And maybe by merging the two of them together, Pearl would have finally had the talent and the opportunity that she always wanted to have. What's funny is that Pearl used to say, "You know I don't like blondes." It's just interesting that MaXXXine ended up being blonde, so I don't know how that would have been reconciled had they become one and the same, but maybe she would have dyed her hair at the end, and that could have been maybe a clue or a nod to the audience like, hey, MaXXXine is Pearl. Because I find the scene where she puts out the cigarette on the 𝘂𝘂 star on the Walk of Fame such a good callback to Pearl because that was one of Pearl's favorite movie stars. She named the alligator after 𝘲, and 𝘲 was also considered the first sex symbol, which is what MaXXXine and Pearl were trying to be. So I just find that part to be a really cool nod and Easter egg to Pearl, and it would have been nice if they would have woven that in to something that made more sense. Don't just throw in Easter eggs, throw in Easter eggs as a sign like, hey, something more is going on here. MaXXXine's path is intertwined with Pearl's, like it always has been. Why do you think they look alike? Why make them look alike if you're not going to have them intertwined in the ending? I just don't get it. That was just such an obvious thing to do. It still could have been executed in a way where maybe the audience wasn't privy to that yet. Maybe by the time she encounters her father, she is then possessed by Pearl. That would have been interesting to see. And to be honest, my mom has a theory that MaXXXine is Pearl in the end. She thinks that's where they were going with it. They did not develop MaXXXine into a monster enough for me to believe that she would shoot her own father in the face, especially while the helicopter is hovering above her and they're watching. First of all, how she got away with that, I have no idea. I have no idea how she just came out of that with no issues. And you know, they show her at the end at the Chinese theater kissing, very much like Pearl, something Pearl would do, because why on earth would anyone do that for a B horror film? No one would act like that. That's just so unrealistic. That's only something Pearl would do. So my mom isn't wrong for thinking that maybe MaXXXine was possessed by Pearl at that point. If that were true, I just wish there would have been more establishment of that. I would have liked to see more of Pearl in there. I know this is called MaXXXine, but we would have gotten more MaXXXine if they would have focused on intertwining MaXXXine and Pearl and make it make sense. I would have loved to see an ending where maybe in the end of everything, just say the movie stays as is, but we change the last few minutes. It would have been cool if MaXXXine at the end of everything, trying to fight for this role, people are getting killed off, had PTSD from X, now she's gonna have PTSD from having to shoot her father in the face. What would have been an even better, more satisfying ending is if MaXXXine would have been completely done with Hollywood at that point, say goodbye to the Puritan 2, turn her back on LA and say, I will not accept a life I do not deserve. I do not accept a life of having to become a monster for fame, having to go through all of these gruesome things. I wish she would have maybe had a change of heart, and that would have been even more badass of her, is to have wanted the fame and then just give it up in an instant for her own well-being and future and mental health, because her staying in the business, it's just not gonna get any better. I wish I could have seen a different MaXXXine coming out of those experiences. Would have loved to see her just walk away from the fame and say that I will not accept a life I do not deserve in an opposite way. It was a repeat mantra for her since X, I will not accept a life I do not deserve. It would have been really cool if they would have turned that on its head and have her say that at the end, not wanting fame at all. I heard that Ti West is considering a 4th film. If there is a 4th film, maybe that's a direction he'll want to go in. Maybe this was literally a small chunk of MaXXXine's story before they intertwine both MaXXXine and Pearl together. I would love to see it. I would love to see it, Ti. I really would. And this whole review, I am not knocking Ti West as a director. I'm not knocking Mia Goth. They are both very incredibly talented. And of course, I loved X and I really, really loved Pearl. It's just MaXXXine didn't do it for me. It didn't wrap up this trilogy for me at all. It just felt like a very short glimpse of time into MaXXXine's experience in LA without giving us an ending. It just felt like it was just the beginning, you know? So maybe there will be a 4th installment where we get some more answers. And in the ending where they do say we're about to film the dream sequence and they show the severed head on the bed, by calling it a dream sequence, I find that interesting. They're gonna go film this dream sequence and then she's like, what are you gonna do now? Or how do you feel about finally having made it? And she says something akin to, I just never want it to end, or I don't want to wake up, or something like that. So I find it interesting that they're filming a dream sequence and she says, I never want it to end. And then Bette Davis' eyes plays. Like, that makes me wonder, are they hinting at something with this whole dream sequence, I never wanted to end thing? Did most of this even happen? I think there's something to be said about like the last couple of minutes of the film. I have a lot of strong feelings on this film. I am disappointed. I'm sick and tired of never getting what I want. Ti West does admit in a interview that the film is very style forward, and his reason for not focusing on MaXXXine's past too much is so that this film can work as a standalone. But I don't believe that it does work as a standalone. You're not going to get the full understanding of MaXXXine and her moments of PTSD and her motivations for things if you don't watch X, and even if you don't watch Pearl. The whole 𝘲𝑪 callback, the Easter egg, you're not gonna know what that means, and that it could be meaningful and make you realize how much MaXXXine Maxine and Pearl share the same path if you don't watch the first two films. Pearl on its own can be a standalone because it's the backstory, it's the prequel, it's technically the first one. You really don't need to see how she ends up in her older age to enjoy that film. But I think for X to be, I mean, X can stand alone too though. X could be a standalone, but I feel like X packs more of a punch knowing Pearl's backstory. Now, Maxine absolutely is not a standalone film in my opinion. It's just not. I think you need the first two to really be a meaningful movie-going experience. I think you need to watch the first two films for sure, but that's just me. That's just my opinion. I do not think it is a standalone film at all. Maybe I will like it more if I have more opportunities to see it again. Some movies tend to grow on me, and maybe this will be one of them. I need to see it a couple more times to see how I feel about it, but I hope that if Ti West and Mia Goth are secretly working on a fourth film, that brings us that intertwining of Maxine and Pearl that I feel would be very satisfying and make these three prior films make more sense. Why make them look alike? Why put them on the same type of path in life, give them the same desires if you're not going to really truly intertwine their fates, you know? Her running over Pearl's head is not enough of an intertwining of a fate for me. It's just not. It very much missed the mark for me, so I'm gonna give it 2.5 stars out of 5. I didn't hate it while watching it, but I did leave the theater very disappointed and immediately thought of all the different ways that it could have been done better. That's just me as a film goer, as a film critic. It wasn't captivating, it wasn't gripping, it just really fell flat. All of the actors individually did a fantastic job, but I don't think the characters and the story were written well enough for that to matter. I feel like Maxine cheapens X a little. It feels like a slap in the face to the first two films, and I really dislike that about it. I know that's just my opinion, and I know there's a lot of fans that love this film, but I just feel like it's not the ending to a trilogy that we really needed. Thank you guys so much for watching my very first film review on YouTube. I hope that you enjoyed it. I know that a lot of you are gonna disagree with me in the comments, and that's okay. I just wanna see if anyone out there agrees with me. How did you feel about it? If you were disappointed, or if you did enjoy the film, let me know in the comments below what you enjoyed about it most and if you think it's brilliant. I really want to know everybody's opinion because it's just weighing heavily on my heart. It's weighing heavily on my heart that I didn't enjoy this film, so let me know in the comments what you thought about the film, and I will see you guys in the next video.